I mean, I thought that the Model 3 was going to help the environment.
I know, after watching that latest episode of Adam Ruins Everything, I just went and canceled my Model 3 reservation.
What the?
Hang on there, guys. We saw the episode too. And while we usually agree with Adam Conover's ideas...
Yeah, I really liked his episodes on prison reform and TSA security.
Yeah, me too. But this last episode on Tesla, well, let's just say his arguments were weak and misleading.
But Adam said that buying a new Tesla and getting rid of your perfectly good Prius is not helping the environment.
Getting rid of your old Prius just means that someone else will buy it and use it. It's not like you're burning it.
Adam pointed out that the energy your EV uses comes from the power grid. You're just shifting your fuel source from gas.
Yeah, and if the power plant burns coal, then the EV can put more CO2 in the air than a hybrid. He even cited an article from Slate magazine.
Okay, let's break that down, because this is where things get misleading.
So let's look at Brent's point that driving a battery EV means you're shifting your fuel source from gasoline to the electricity grid.
That's true, but that's not a bad thing. According to the US Department of Energy, an internal combustion engine car, or ICE car, puts out 19.64 pounds of CO2 for every gallon of gasoline it burns.
The Slate article that Adam cited was written over 3 years ago, and its data was already out of date. In that article, the author stated that the US energy grid is 40% coal, 25% natural gas, 20% nuclear, and 10% renewable.
So if we look at up-to-date information from the US Department of Energy, we see that as of 2016, 29.8% of US energy is produced by coal, 34.5% is natural gas, 19.6% is nuclear, 14.8% is renewable.
Yeah, but what do all those numbers mean?
It means that if we do some math, we can find out how much CO2 the US electricity grid emits for every kilowatt hour of electricity produced.
So we can compare apples to apples, so to speak.
So according to the US Department of Energy, burning coal produces 2.1 pounds of CO2 for every kilowatt hour produced, burning natural gas produces 1.2 pounds of CO2, and nuclear produces 0, just like the renewables of wind, hydro, and solar.
So doing the math, we see that the average person plugging into the US electricity grid right now will be producing 1.05 pounds of CO2 for every kilowatt hour they put into their EV.
Okay, but all those numbers, how does that tell us anything?
Let's cut to the chase. I've driven my Tesla Model X for 25,000 miles, and my average electricity use per mile is 350 watt-hours per mile.
The average ICE car in the US last year got 23.6 miles per gallon.
So if I plugged my Tesla Model X into the average US electricity grid and drove 1 mile, I would be putting 0.366 pounds of CO2 into the atmosphere.
And if I drove the average ICE car 1 mile, I would be putting 0.832 pounds of CO2 into the atmosphere. That's over 220% more CO2. That's over twice as much.
And I'd like to point out that if I get my energy from solar, which I do, then my Tesla is emitting 0 CO2 into the atmosphere, both from a tailpipe perspective and a power source perspective.
Another thing Adam didn't mention was that to produce every gallon of gasoline, you need to refine it, and that takes electricity. In fact, it takes 6 kilowatt hours of electricity to refine 1 gallon of gasoline.
Yeah, that's right. The electricity it takes to refine 1 gallon of gas could drive my Tesla Model X over 17 miles.
We hate to ruin everything, Adam, but leaving out that little fact alone kind of ruins your argument.
But wait, Adam said that according to one study, even if 1/3 of drivers switched to EVs, the carbon savings could be tiny.
So let's do the math. There are 253 million cars on US roads today. Each one produces 4.7 metric tons of CO2 every year, according to the US Department of Energy. We just showed that my Tesla, plugged into the average US electricity grid, produces just 43% of that.
So 253 million cars are producing 1.189 billion tons of CO2 per year in the US.
Now, if 1/3 of those cars, or 84 million, were battery EVs, then the US would put out 226 million metric tons less every year. That's almost 20% less CO2.
That doesn't sound tiny to me.
And that's if every one of those EVs was plugged into the average utility grid. A study by the California Center for Sustainable Energy in 2012 showed that 39% of EV drivers have solar panels.
If you get your power from the sun, then you aren't producing any CO2 by driving your EV.
But what about when Adam talked about all the CO2 it takes to make the car?
Yeah, they said that was half the carbon footprint.
It's true. Making a car puts out a lot of carbon, but that would be true of making an ICE car or an electric car.
Yeah, in fact, that 2010 article he cited from The Guardian just does a simple calculation to come up with 720 kilograms of CO2 per 1,000 pounds spent. But that was based on an electrical grid that was much higher weighted towards coal. In fact, in 2015, 94 coal plants were closed. And in 2016, 9.5 gigawatts of solar, 8 gigawatts of natural gas, 6.8 gigawatts of wind, and 1.1 gigawatts of nuclear were added to the grid. 33% of our electricity now comes from renewable and non-polluting sources.
But Adam said that making the batteries for an EV is worse because their batteries are made of rare metals that take intensive mining.
That's misleading also. A Tesla battery is only about 2% lithium, which can be found in its salt form all around the Earth and can be produced by evaporating the water out of the lithium brine.
The rest of the battery is primarily nickel and graphite, which are not rare at all.
But what about that expert that agreed with Adam?
If you actually listen to what Professor Mike Berners-Lee said, he didn't really help Adam's argument at all.
Yeah, he said EVs are more efficient. Manufacturing adds about 50% to the total carbon footprint. So if you buy a new car too often, you can completely undo all the carbon savings that you might get from buying an electric car. If you really want to help save the environment, the best thing you can do is to reduce the amount you drive and to drive your current car as long as possible, provided it's reasonably efficient. But if your car is beyond repair and you absolutely need to buy a new one, then go ahead and buy yourself a nice small electric. Perhaps even a used one.
But Adam said when it comes to saving the planet, the efficiency of your car's engine is small potatoes. The real problem is that Americans bought 17.5 million cars last year and drove a total of 2.7 trillion miles. I'm sorry, but buying another car just isn't going to fix that.
Yeah, and that's a shame that he said that, because by that reasoning, none of us should do anything to help save the planet.
Okay, so the guy on Adam's show said that he wanted to buy a Tesla and help the environment. But Adam said, well, you can't have both.
That's just plain wrong.
He also said these companies will use that desire to help the planet to sell you more stuff that's hurting the planet. Buying green products won't solve the problem because buying stuff is part of the problem. We need to reduce what we buy and reuse what we have. We can't shop our way out of this.
We agree that we should all reduce what we consume and reuse what we have. But since Americans are consumers of products, shouldn't we use the power of our money to consume products that are as friendly to the planet as possible?
Continuing to drive your ICE or hybrid car will actually force you to increase buying stuff, like hundreds of gallons of gasoline and motor oil per year.
Adam ignored many things in this overly simplistic episode.
Like what?
How about oil spills? To power an ICE car, you have to factor in the cost of oil spills.
And the energy and pollution it takes to drill, refine, and transport oil and gasoline.
Not to mention the cost in money, lives, and pollution to wage wars that are caused by humans' insatiable need for oil.
Nobody has wars over solar panels and wind turbines.
And he forgot to factor in all of the other pollutants that burning gasoline creates.
Not to mention fracking.
Dang it, Zac and Jesse ruined everything. I just canceled my reservation for the Model 3. Now I have to go back on again at the bottom.
Thanks for watching this episode of Now You Know. I want to give a big thank you to Brent and Bobby for working so hard on this video. To get this video out quickly, they worked tirelessly for the past few days on shooting, editing, and graphics, so thank you guys. I also want to state that this wasn't our definitive answer as to why we think electric vehicles are the right choice for the environment. We will continue to produce videos and to educate and introduce people to this amazing revolution in transportation that is taking place right now. We wanted to get this video out quickly, because what bothered me the most about Adam's episode was that Adam has a big audience. An audience that includes many people who probably have never driven an EV or know much about EVs. And if they listen to Adam, their next car purchase might be for an ICE car instead of an electric car, and that would be a shame. So I hope if you know people who have been talking about Adam's episode, that you will share our rebuttal video, and at the very least get a balanced discussion to take place. Adam's show normally reveals the propaganda that we've all blindly listened to and swallowed, and that's why we like his show. And this is why we were so disappointed when he fed us all this oil company propaganda that we've been hearing for years that simply isn't true. Thanks for watching again. If you like this episode, please hit the like button and subscribe, and also consider supporting us on Patreon. I want to give a big shout out to all the new Patreon supporters who are making videos like this possible. In fact, I'm using our new mini teleprompter gadget that we just got in the studio, and it's already making our videos better, and we can afford to get it because of our Patreon supporters. So a big thank you goes out to Alice Chuang, Paul Mills, Ahmed Zafar, James Schmitz, Chris H., Richard Hugo, and Ivan. Thank you so much. Now you know.